Welcome back. Well, yes, indeed. We've got Dr. Charles Omole here with us. He is a corporate and governance strategist to give us his perspective on the CBN's cashless policy. Good morning, and thank you for coming on today.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, we have heard the governor highlight, the objectives of those policies, how they want to see that they improve things and ensure that things happen and people are a lot safer, transactions are better done without us feeling the impact. But we also do know that there's been a lot of reactions. I don't know to use the word mixed feelings, not too sure, but there have been reactions to the CBN's policy, including that of the House of Reps as well. In the implementation of this particular policy, which has been on for a while, hoping to catch on across the country March 2020, what's your impression of how it's been implemented so far?
Well, I think to discuss this, we need to look at it from three perspectives. First is the substance of the policy itself. Next is what you've just mentioned, which is the implementation or the process of the policy. And the third, the timing of the policy. Clearly, if we start with the substance of the policy, it's clearly a good policy. Nigeria has no choice but to go cashless eventually. Of course, cashless doesn't mean no cash at all. It just simply means less cash, bring more of the economy into the formal sector. So there's no dispute in that regard. But I think the issue here is in terms of the process. Partly lack of consultation, for example, not carrying people along. And also, there is suspicion as to the timing of some of the activities of the CBN. It's interesting, over the weekend, the CBN governor was speaking, I think, in Edo State. And in his speech, he admitted that the CBN has been engaging in what he called unconventional instruments as a way of managing the economy. Now, that's a coded word for saying, yes, this is what the textbook CBN job should be, but we've been going beyond that because the nation demands it. And the question has to be, what is actually driving that? And there's a suspicion it's been driven by a quest to generate revenue for government.
So is that what you think informs the manner with which they are implementing the cashless policy?
Absolutely. I mean, in terms of governance globally, usually you start with carrot. You incentivize to change public behavior. If that doesn't change over time, they begin to bring in the stick. But it seems we are doing everything opposite here. Everything is stick, 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 stick. And you can ask, where's the carrot?
Stick? Would you really say that there is a stick? Well, maybe one can argue that there is a stick now. When you go to pay 50 naira where you did not pay before, it might feel like a stick. However, when we look at how long this cashless policy has been on, I do remember that I think it was now Emi Sanusi, who was then CBN governor, who tried to introduce the cashless policy. He was successful to a large extent. I think that even that will be debatable because the politicians still found ways around still carrying huge amounts of cash around. Nonetheless, if you now bring it to where we are, would you not say that we have given, or the CBN has given, enough leeway for people to get used to the idea of going cashless, and that if there's going to be a fee now, that it is fair enough for consumers to carry it?
That's a arguable position. But what I would say is, if you look at it over the years, the pressure on consumer funds has increased significantly in the economy in terms of bank charges, for example. So if CBN doesn't do anything at all, this cashless policy was already on a downward spiral, in my view, because of this plethora of charges by the banks. And part of the problem with those charges is a lot of them are centrally imposed by the CBN. I mean, one of the recommendations I made a while ago was CBN should stop these centrally imposed charges, allow banks to charge, and create real competition with those charges. Because if up to 75% of some banks' profit in Nigeria are from charges, so you can just sit pretty and do nothing. Don't lend to the real economy and just make money purely through charges. So so the cashless policy was already struggling, in my view, through all those charges, because what tends to happen is people now would prefer to pay cash. I mean,
weren't we already getting used to it? I mean, a lot of the banks, they'll argue that they've invested. We now have banking apps. You can, I mean, forget the fact that you can even bank online, which even trying to get Nigerians to sign up to that was a problem. I know how long it took me to go online with my bank, and eventually, you know, getting the apps on your mobiles for mobile phones, for instance, it took a while. They made the investment. They encouraged their customers, and now we're all used to it. We're used to banking from the comfort of our homes. We're used to buying airtime from the comfort of our homes, paying bills, you know, buying recharge cards, or, you know, paying the bills on your mobile phones and things of the sort. Would we say now that we will trade? I mean, I would think that there will have been a study done to see just how people have caught on to this, and whether or not they're comfortable, or whether they would mind paying a little extra charge on the comfort of those services.
well, well, you are right in the sense that yes, some of this is one might argue needs to be paid for. I guess part of the challenge also is at what level in terms of the fees. Take the charge on deposit and on withdrawals, for example. Even those who, in principle, believe maybe there should be a charge are questioning the level at which it's been set. So
You mean on the deposit?
yes, yes. So part of the issue here is what is driving this push for more money out of your pocket. As you know, Nigerians are struggling as it is, and I feel that the CBN timing is wrong, given the potential increase in VAT, all the other pressure, as it were, on the depositors' funds. And,
If you don't mind,
yes.
if you don't mind me butting in, we'll come back to that timing thing, because you harped on it earlier. Would you say that the cost of the cashless policy is a little too much on the banker, on the people banking?
Oh, you mean on the consumers? On the customers?
Yes.
Absolutely, yes. You know, I think part of the challenge here is a Nigerian sort of construct, which is everything has to happen very, very quickly. You know, yes, I mean, a bank saying we'll recoup our investment over a 10-year period is not the same thing as saying we'll recoup the same investment over a 4-year period. So in which case, we charge more because we want to get our investment back much more quickly compared to spreading it over a longer period of time.
So would you support a position where the CBN says, look, cut down on these charges?
Yeah, actually, what I expected the CBN to do was it's almost like what we call regulatory balance, where, for example, you have 10 legislation, you want to propose new legislation, and you say for every new legislation you have to get rid of and hold one so that there's no regulatory burden. So what CBN should have done is, okay, what's the situation right now in terms of the burden on customers? This is it. Okay, we're introducing this. So what do we reduce here to be able to say, okay, this is cost neutral? CBN is not doing that. What they are just doing is incremental, adding everything on top of everything else.
I see your point there, because it would seem that you bank, you're doomed. You don't bank, you're still doomed.
Exactly.
You know, so
Exactly.
it would seem that you're being punished for even having any money at all and wanting to do business with the bank.
That's exactly the point.
Who are they talking to, though? Because, I mean, yes, indeed, it is convenient to, you know, use your card. It's convenient to bank online. You know, you really shouldn't be carrying cash around. But it's supposed to be your choice, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, the challenge is, I mean, in the last 2 days, for example, I remember I went to visit a store yesterday, and I wanted to pay, and as I gave my card, the lady just ran towards the front entrance. Then I said, "What's happening?" He said, "That's the only place we get reception." So she had the POS in store, and she ran towards the front of the store. He said, because if we're not in that particular location, we don't get...
There's not network.
There's no network. You know, so this is how bad things are, you know, in terms of infrastructure.
So which brings me to the issue of the infrastructure with which we run this policy itself.
Yes.
You know what I mean? The cost is on the one hand, then there's this infrastructure. I understand from a research, you know, recently, about some 90 million Nigerians are on 2G network. some 50 something or some 30 something million are on 3G network, and some maybe paltry 2 million or thereabout or less are on 4G network. So do you think this cashless policy of the CBN factored in our technological or internet integration challenges?
Yes, that's the case of the tail wagging the dog here. When CBN is far ahead of the capacity of the infrastructure to cope with. And that's why I'm saying this stick approach will not work. You know, you are right. I mean, by the way, the story I was giving you just now happened in Lagos. So imagine going to some rural hinterland, exactly. So we're not talking of some village somewhere here. This is Lagos we're talking about. So you know, with that infrastructure deficit, the CBN is actually pushing, purely to raise revenue here. That's more or less my conclusion here.
And there'll also be the talk of, people in the rural areas, of course. I mean, recently the CBN, I'm talking about people who are cashing out, farmers who are cashing out. And I'm wondering, are they also taking into cognizance the level of education needed for this cashless policy to really work? Because if indeed rural farmers are getting richer, I want to imagine that, people will be, I don't know if they're doing the transactions online or whether they'll be doing the transactions by cash. Are they factoring, this kinds of situations, people who need to do business in those areas, are they factoring them into the equation as well?
Well, that's probably answer a question you were raising earlier in terms of, CBN have given the cashless policy enough time to work. But the question is, if you have a nation that is largely illiterate, largely rural, you will need more time to, to sort of socialize certain policies. You can't do it at certain speed. And that's a problem here, that, the transaction charge, for example, the PS charge for example is on 1,000 naira and above in theory, but the question is, who buys anything that is? You can't buy anything less than 1,000 naira anywhere.
Some people actually make you. I was told a story just yesterday that if you want to use your POS, they'll tell you, please, can you make it up to 1,000 naira? You cannot use your card for a transaction less than 1,000 naira.
But if it's above 1,000, you get a 50 naira additional charge.
Yes.
Either from the fuel station, even the merchants now are adding that cost component to their charges too.
Yes, I was reading a sort of survey. It's an anecdote, yesterday that says that in the last 4 weeks, 80% of people who now buy petrol pay by cash, because they went around interviewing different petrol attendants in Lagos and said, people bring out their card, and when they see that sign that says 15 naira, they say, okay, don't worry, I'll pay cash.
I'll pay cash. And it's a problem because what it then means is that for those petrol stations, people that deal in bulk cash and then have to take those things to the bank, money to the bank, then they will be charged, for certain deposits above a certain amount. Isn't that a problem already?
It is a problem because, you see, the point here is CBN, I think, their position is difficult because I suspect what is pushing the policy is different from their own monetary policy. They are, sources tell me CBN, as whether it's true or not, I don't know, as target in terms of how much they must raise. We have a government that's running a deficit budget.
Almost all agencies these days have these targets.
Exactly. So this is what's pushing CBN, is my point. Raise money, raise money, raise money. That is, I think, the problem here. So they're not just doing it purely out of their own independence and, feeling, okay, this is what Nigeria needs at the moment. So if that is what's driving the policy, then regardless of the impact, they will continue.
But, when you initially said that these charges, I think your challenge with them was that they're usually centrally imposed.
Yes.
And you rather have banks charge some of these things, but there are those who will also tell you, look, if you leave, wouldn't we rather have banks, first of all, the CBN, they ensure that the banks perform the core banking function first, because if you go with the charges, you're going to have a lot, if not the same kind of thing happening at the moment.
There will be, right now, we don't have much competition in our banks, as it were, because you move from bank A to bank B, the fees structure are practically the same. So really, there's no sense.
The services.
Yeah, well, it's arguable whether there's a substantial difference in service. But the point, but the point is that if banks can charge themselves freely without CBN, CBN will still be there as a regulator to ensure fairness, as it were, overall. But it will not prescribe to say, because if you look at the whole handbook by CBN, this service, 50 naira, this service, 100. So it doesn't matter whether you perform or not, you charge that amount. So as a bank, therefore, there's no incentive to improve, because I can still charge you that 50 naira regardless of whether I perform a good job or not. Whereas if I know that you can go to another bank that charges 10 naira for that same service, it will prompt me to make sure I give you value. Right now, we're not getting value because this thing, we are captive audience, so to speak, to the banks.
Do you then see, come March 2020, they are proceeding with ensuring that this same policy, as is being implemented in some of the other states now, I think Lagos, Abuja, some other states, do you see CBN ensuring that the whole nation faces this same situation? Or they may say, okay, well, let's stand down and review this policy, because it's happened before.
I see the pattern here happening with same thing with Federal Inland Revenue, same thing with CBN, and that is, you have a small pot of people who pay tax. Government need more revenue, we understand that. Rather than increase the tax net, people pay tax, we are putting more pressure on the same few people that pay the tax. Now, the last research I saw showed that 60% of Nigerians are outside the banking sector. So if 60% of Nigerians are outside the bank, shouldn't the focus be how do we get more people into the banking sector without even raising the fee? Volume will mean more money will come in. So there are things CBN could do. For example, universal account, whereby you can port, just like telephone, you have your bank account with bank A. If you are not happy with the service, you move to bank B, but you retain your bank number, everything, and you move to to the next bank. Things to making bank account easy to open, for people. So as long as 60% of our people are not within the banking sector, whatever fee you are charging the same 40% every single time, and it gets to a point where it begins to be counterproductive, and I think that's where we are arriving at right now.
You mentioned the timing the other time. What do you have in mind?
Timing in terms of what's going on, what else is going on within the economy is what I mean by timing. With increase, you have the pressure, now charge on deposits, charge on POS, VAT is going up. The whole economy, the optics of it doesn't look good at the moment. This doesn't seem the right time to do that. But it seems, like I said, what CBN ought to do is to increase the customer base of banks. Imagine if just 30% of those 60% are now within the banking sector.
But I don't know. I don't see how that's going to happen, because from some other research, there is indication that bank accounts are becoming docile, are becoming dormant because of the charges. So how is that going to happen?
That's because lots of people tend to have multiple. I don't know about you. Lots of people have multiple accounts.
No. Some people that were interviewed actually said that they shut down their accounts because the bank's charges were too much.
Yes, some clearly can do that. But if you are being paid salary into your account, for example, you have nowhere to go. You are captive audience. But if you are a business owner, you might decide, okay, you don't want to do that. But the key point really here about this is that people have very few choices here in terms of options. And CBN probably recognized that, and I think that is what's putting pressure. But I'm saying what the CBN should be focusing on at the moment is getting more people into the banking sector. Therefore, volume will mean more money will come in, rather than still piling on pressure on the same few people who have bank accounts.
Well, they might argue that perhaps they have been on that policy of getting more people to the banks, and maybe they're at a level that they're comfortable with, and they think that those people can pay what it is that they're looking for them to pay.
Well, if 60% are outside the banking sector, then I mean, I'm sure they can do fine. Things might have improved, but I'm sure they can do more, much more.
You know, all of these policies, yes, you look at this one, then you have even that some proposing additional charges in the telecom sector.
Yeah.
You have agencies who they say they've got target in terms of what they need to do.
Yeah.
Even the border closure, government is talking about how much revenue they seem to have made or are making or hope to make if things go well. Do you think all these policies are properly thought out? What is the fundamental thing that you think is missing or we're getting right?
In one of my articles last month, I was comparing the Ghanaian economy to Nigerian economy. And I was saying that in 2016, the government of Ghana saw that all the indices were bad. So what did they do in 2017? They cut taxes, largely, abolished some taxes, cut the rate of some taxes. 2 years on, the revenue that comes into Ghana economy, to Ghana government, has increased, even though those taxes were cut. You see, the natural trend globally is increasing taxation doesn't necessarily mean you get more money into government coffers. You increase taxation, avoidance increases. People find ways around it because it gets to a particular point. So the issue here for me is I think government are desperate. They need money. There's no doubt about that. I mean, talk less about. I mean, in addition, on the list you listed. I mean, you're not talking of government proposing bringing back tolls on our roads, for example. So everything becomes taking everything out. And the issue is this: once you put so much pressure on consumer spending, you are looking at the barrel of a recession, because consumer spending is what keeps the economy going. And when you see your money going down, 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 even without you doing anything, it gets to a point where the government could be cutting its nose to spite its face.
Well, the OPS, are they culpable in any way? Have they made their point enough that actually they should be the drivers of some of these things? Because, I mean, they should be the largest employers of labor.
Well, I mean, I'm not quite sure whether they have, but the question here is, I think the government needs to review itself, to review this policy at the moment. I feel, in terms of revenue, my concern also is the fact that the government is taxing production, they're not taxing profit.
We'll take a look at that a lot more when we come back from this break. Stay with us.